Salute, folks. Today I'm going to talk about endocrine disruptors in Satan's little season. My bad to always talk about the bad stuff that we have to encounter in this little season. However, it's paramount that we know the enemy's weapons so we can avoid them as much as possible. It's easier said than done, and you definitely can avoid them all. However, it's without a shadow of a doubt extremely advantageous to know about them. And before I get into all the specific details, always the utmost important thing you can do is pray. Pray for protection and for the Father to cover you with his spiritual hedges to protect you from these modern weapons of evil and the devil. Because trust me, they are everywhere. Just look up.
Spraying all day long, emptying my tanks on you while I sing this song. There's too many of you down there, that's what I've been told. You're off to meet your maker before you get too old.
The Father, Jesus, and Holy Spirit clan with Dan. Yes, endocrine disruptors and xenoestrogens, as they're sometimes called, and microplastics too, which also fall into the xenoestrogen category, have basically permanently infiltrated our food, air, and water. Until the new heaven and earth, I don't see them going away. However, the Father is literally the ultimate miracle maker. I'm sure with just a wave of his hand he could obliterate it all from us, but we don't know his exact plan in that regard, but they will be obliterated at one time or another. However, right now we literally have to live in a toxic soup of them. I live on a street where it's all renters, and on Saturday it seems like everybody does their laundry, and if I have to go outside and do some gardening when the weather's nice and it's just like a furnace of the scent of Bounce and fabric softener, and oh it's terrible, it's horrible. I don't like owning disabilities, or it's not disability but conditions, I should say, so I'm not going to say I have it, but I do have OCD type tendencies, and they've always been exacerbated the worst when I'm exposed to chemicals. Ever since I was half my age, I despised the scent of chemicals, perfumes, household cleaners. I've been using the natural stuff for half my life. And just a quick tip in that regard, it's amazing what you can do with just some baking soda, vinegar, and they do sell very affordable, natural, unscented soap products. Or I'll even buy the odd one that's naturally scented with, like, say, sweet orange essential oil. It's not that I don't like scents, I actually really like essential oils. Two, I really like the combination of, for a little house spray, is sandalwood and lemongrass oil. For some reason, just lemongrass oil smells like Fruit Loops to me. Some nostalgia for when I was a little kid. But yeah, they're fairly inexpensive too, those two in particular. But I mentioned in my recent video where I talked about relationships in the little season, how the Almighty Father programmed us to be able to spot like pheromones from like specific genetic diversity, especially since probably in the little season, or in the millennial kingdom too, or in general when we lived in smaller villages, we didn't have as much genetic diversity. So when you were living in smaller, close-knit communities, being able, those pheromones, to be able to subconsciously detect the right partner with who's basically the most genetically diverse to you, is an ideal mating strategy that the Most High God programmed into our bodies. Because I'm not going to get specifically into race mixing, because that's a totally different story. But ensuring that your partner is genetically diverse to you and not closely related is ideal for strong, vigorous offspring. And the Almighty God in all his wisdom programmed that into us. But now, with all the perfumes and colognes and deodorants, it's messing all of that up, and we can't really detect as well as we could. I'm not going to say at all, but we not as well as we could. And the birth control messes that up big time too. I hate to use this as an example, but this is the example that they did research into. And apparently, let's just say exotic dancers, when they use a birth control pill, all in all, their extra income, their tips for the month, stayed at a low baseline a low straight baseline below what the dancers without the birth control made. However, there was no straight line with the girls who didn't take the birth control. When they were ovulating, that's when their tips always peaked significantly for the month. So all the degenerates in the establishment that were tipping these ladies could tell a difference. It's all subconscious, but all in all, there is a difference, and that was the measured variable in that regard. However, yeah, I despise chemicals. When I was in rehab for my extreme alcohol abuse, they asked us what would be the scenario where we would relapse. And I said I would have to fall into a vat of Mr. Clean or Pine Sol and get it all up in my nose and in my mouth and in my ears. And if that happened, I would relapse. And I still say that to this day. If that ever happened, Lord, please obviously don't let that happen. And the chances of it are slim to none. But if I were to fall into a vat of Mr. Clean or Pine Sol, I would buy an enormous bottle of vodka and whiskey. That's how much I despise chemicals. And yeah, don't, like, bounce sheets or whatever you call those different brands of dryer sheets. Those are incredibly high in toxic endocrine disrupting chemicals. Endocrine disrupting means it messes up your hormones, and your hormones is what makes you feel alive and full of vitality when you have the proper balance of them and proper ratios. And don't even get me started on fabric softener and Tide and yeah, Mr. Clean, Pine Sol, any of that stuff, man. You should avoid it like the plague.
Looky here, sweetheart. Don't mop with dirty water again, Pine Sol. It's a special formula. Only Pine Sol Cleaner has it, and you need it.
You can make your own little base cleaner with some vinegar and some natural soap. And as I said, you could add some essential oils or buy the ones with essential oils already added. Sweet orange is a good one. Anything citrus is good too. Lime is incredible. Lime makes a great house spray too. Incredibly invigorating and helps with focus. And if you have any neighbors that smoke the wacky tobacco, it cuts the scent of that too. Yeah, here in Canada, we have a Shoppers Drug Mart, and I walked into one of those the other night, and you have to walk into the perfume section, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt like I was suffocating. I actually gave my poor last girlfriend SHIT whenever she came over and gave her I didn't mean to give her a hard time, but it probably annoyed her quite a bit that like I could smell the Tide on her clothes. I was just like, you reek like Tide. But speaking of like OCD, you can't go too crazy and overboard. I'm probably like the extreme of being extreme and overboard, but kind of sane at the same time. Like, you gotta draw the line. Like, for me, there was a choice between tap water and bottled water. Like, I could pay for a reverse osmosis system, which is definitely something I'll have to do eventually. But if it comes to buying fluoride-free plastic bottled water, I go with that. There's definitely microplastics in there, and I don't even want to look it up because I don't want it to invade my mind while I'm drinking water. It's delicious water. It's fluoride free. Between the two evils, it's better that than tap water, in my opinion. There's probably more microplastics in the tap water anyhow. I do have some mixed fabrics that are like half cotton and half polyester. Like the polyester is terrible, especially when you dry it, and then it's basically just like plastic gas fumes coming off the stuff when you take it out of the dryer. It's the battle of both evils. It's either you leave it in there to cool off and then everything is wrinkled, or you take it out while it's still hot and you're breathing in plastic fumes. I have a few pairs of linen shorts and linen shirts, but they look terrible. And good luck. Good luck filling your whole wardrobe with that stuff. Costs a fortune now. If you're buying tomato sauce, it's probably preferable, well, it's definitely preferable to buy it in a glass container. Some cans are fine. You'll know just by opening the can. If you're not sure and something's on sale or something, don't buy a dozen. Just buy one and see if there's a white lining in there or if it's just tin. If it's just metal inside, the can should be fine. But at any rate, anything you can buy in a glass jar is preferable. Don't heat plastic. Definitely don't put plastic in the microwave. Don't even own a microwave if you can. I've never owned a microwave. Ever since I've moved out of my parents' house in my early 20s, I've never had a microwave. You can go without it. Toaster ovens work wonders. Don't think people who don't want to touch receipt paper are crazy. I'm one of those people. Don't touch receipt paper. Especially the ink. And in case you haven't noticed, when you order stuff from Amazon, they have those stickers facing out. Those are the same thing. That's the same ink and the same paper. Don't touch that. Usually, say I get a bottle of supplements and it's got one of those ink papers stuck to it, I'll cover it with a piece of duct tape in case I touch it by mistake. Don't go crazy about it, but just little stuff like that. Minimize a few things because we're going to be exposed to it no matter what. Like I said with the polyester in some of my clothes and some of the microplastics probably in my drinking water. You can't win them all, but definitely minimizing will help. And in regard to EMF, the frequencies of the air, I've often heard people make the link between that and Satan being the prince and power of the air, and it must be affiliated with the electromagnetic activity we have in the air, the synthetic type, the non-ethereal type, if you're following me on that. And you know what? I wouldn't put that out of the realm of possibility. I believed that a lot more firmly at one time, whereas now after going through so much controlled opposition and so much filtering over the years, especially through the demic, I'm a lot more defensive and less trusting and more skeptical. That's why, for me, besides obviously being faithful to Jesus and the Most High God, me really being in a high approval rating of the Millennial Kingdom thing says a lot, because it takes a lot to convince me of anything now. And I used to have the pendants. I even had the little Q-Link pendant, and I didn't like having a Q around my neck, especially remember around the last, not the 2024 selection, but the one before that. I wasn't a big fan of the letter Q. I didn't like having a Q around my neck. And then I realized it was a crystal, like wrapped in copper. And right when I realized what I had there, it took a nice little trip into the river. It's in the Detroit River somewhere now. And I even had all the lambs hats and toques, and actually I still have them, and they're nice, and I still wear those. There is nothing wrong with having like wool and silver in your clothing, but for its value in blocking anything, I don't know. I don't use Wi-Fi in my house. It's all wired. I have access to my neighbors, and if I use that, if I have that signal coming this way, I'll throw on my lamb's hat. And but man, it was really being over analyzed and scare tacticked back a few years ago with the connecting to the Bluetooth, and the Bluetooth thing is real. The connection to the hokey pokey and the Bluetooth. I've done my own experiments on that, and it's quite real. But they had people saying like, oh, it's going to connect to that, and there's a pathogen in the hokey pokey that'll turn into the Marburg, and people's eyes are going to burn out of their head. And so, you know what? Who knows? Nothing surprises me anymore. It could still happen, but I'm not a betting man. But even if I was forced to, I wouldn't put a lot of stock into that. But there definitely is correlations. Like I was a lot more OCD type tendencies about that in the past, and I just have the Ethernet through the wire. And I even asked the guy when he changed my modem, I was like, no electromagnetic signals come out of that modem, right? It's just the wire. And he assured me that, yeah, it's just the wire, no Wi-Fi-ish type activity. I'm definitely not a fan of those demonic looking towers. There's definitely something nefarious about it, and but don't obsess over it. Don't get crazy over it. Use some minor precautions here and there. Like there was that book, I believe it was called The Invisible Rainbow, that describes how certain diseases spiked at the time when radio frequencies changed, and every time they would upgrade, like to the first generation, to the second generation, the third generation, that certain ailments would keep going up. But that's a very loosely based science, and there's a lot of like correlation studies aren't very reliable, because at the same time, so did like vegetable oils and hydrogenated oils enter our diet more. Anti-fertility foods like corn flakes and processed sugar kept going up and up and up in those times too. So it's hard to... Correlation studies aren't the most reliable because there's so many other factors that can go into it. But the one correlation study that you can't ignore no matter what, with, like I mentioned, with the synthetic estrogens and chemicals everywhere, and the poison in our food, and the EMF, we are in a toxic soup, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. That is one correlation, all in all, we can definitely put a stamp of approval on. And something I almost forgot to mention, ever since the Paul and Alpha Talks have been talking about the parasite thing, which is good, and it's extremely interesting. However, I started seeing more comments surface about ivermectin. Oh boy. So, when the demic happened, and the Team B, the controlled opposition on the alternative platforms, started talking about different compounds and stuff like that. And see, I was so convinced about the shedding thing too. The shedding thing freaked me out, and they started saying like, "Oh, I'll just say mectin here for the shedding," and they even said for the people who believed in the vid, in the virus, they said it was good for that too. And so I just noticed that they were pushing the horse paste. I'll call it the horse paste too. They're pushing it like crazy. And alongside of it, they were always pushing a few other compounds, which natural medicine wise are actually really good compounds. Like quercetin is pretty good stuff when used properly, with other what are called bioflavonoids and vitamin C and polyphenols and cofactors from plants that can help with certain antioxidant, anti-inflammatory processes in the body. However, I was wondering why they were pushing like certain things along with the horse paste. And there's a reason for it. But anyhow, going back when they started pushing that at first, I was like, well, I'll look into it. I'm going to do some research on it. And it took me about 30 seconds to find out that it's the mectin was not good for testosterone production or fertility. Whereas, okay, like say you're a 45-year-old man and you don't want any more children, or woman, you're a 35-year-old woman, you don't want any more children. Oh, not fertility it sounds okay to you. Well, it's not okay, because the vital hormones that make you fertile are vital hormones that prevent disease and aging and things of that nature. So you don't want any type of anti-fertility compounds in your body at any age. And it turns out that quercetin in particular turns off a few elimination pathways and enzymes in the kidneys and liver, kind of similar to what grapefruit juice does with medications, to prevent the mectin, the horse paste, from being cleared from your body properly in a certain amount of time, which raises the anti-fertility action of the medicine. So you have the sharp thing that's definitely going to cause fertility issues. And then on the other side of the spectrum, let's get the right-wing hopium Q-tards with the horse paste and sterilize them that way. It's very well planned. You could almost say diabolically planned. In the little season. Yes, anybody who is making comments about how you can get it on Amazon.com, the horse paste, and take your own dose, measured out. No, do not touch that stuff. That stuff is not worth it. I've said my piece. If you have any additional notes or tips or tricks or questions, or just a kind comment to put, please feel free to use my comment section anytime, like the video if you haven't. And one more thing while I'm at it, since we're kind of in this category, I'll talk about blue light for a quick second. You don't have to wear blue blockers all day. Like during the day, the blue light can actually keep you more awake and alert. It's when you're winding down. If you're gonna put on a pair of blue blockers, probably the best time to do it would be like after dinner or like 3 to 4 hours before sleep. You can throw those guys on, and you can get a pair for like $20 on Amazon. They are really helpful. So if you are using your device close to bedtime, the light's still not good, but at least you have the blue blocked. Yeah, definitely don't wear those all day. You need a spectrum of different lights. You get them all from the sun, but if you are exposed to a computer screen or an LED light before dinner up to the early afternoon, you're fine. But yes, blue blockers do have a very nice time and place. They're a very useful device. And another tip is just to have a plant in your house. There's a lot of microplastics in the dust, and a plant can help, like a yucca plant or any type of good tropical indoor plant can help purify the air. I'm undecided on whether air purifiers are beneficial or not, so in my opinion it's best just to get a plant. That way you're getting the benefit of additional oxygen, and a good way to ensure that your body's filtering out the microplastics properly is don't add to it through diet. Like chicken unfortunately does have a ton of microplastics in it, but fortunately beef is superior protein for me, for sure. I don't know about you, but it's going to be everywhere in the diet. But buy organic when possible, especially with like Dirty Dozen items. I would definitely buy organic apples. I would never eat a non-organic apple. And you still wash the organic ones real good too. Blueberries, I would go organic. Frozen blueberries are actually quite affordable. Broccoli, not necessary. You can get broccoli non-organic. And depending on who you ask online, the carnivores will definitely say no. They'll say it's a toxic flour, but broccoli does have some compounds in it that supposedly do help detoxify microplastics and xenoestrogens. I appreciate you being here, and may the Most High Almighty Father be with you. In Jesus' mighty name, and peace be with you.